Good afternoon, everyone. I am Anto Budiarjo. Welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern, trying to figure out where we're headed from a smart buildings industry and all of that. Panelist profiles are listed on mondaylive.org if you want to see who we are. The most important thing I need to say here that the views expressed are personal, not of any company or organization. And do get involved and post your comments and chat and questions on the Zoom chat. We want to make this very interactive. And lastly, this slide deck, if you want any of the links on it, is on the homepage of mondaylive.org. So we're starting a new month, March of 22, and our theme is somewhere along the lines of reconfiguring the BAS industry. We spent quite a lot of time in the last few months talking about the different issues and how things are the new stuff and whatever. The thinking is that we'd like to spend March to sort of figure out how all of this is going to manifest itself into the future of the industry. So this is kind of the thinking behind that. Today's agenda, we'll have a normal chit chat, and then we're trying to do something different today. We're going to have a guest moderator, Melissa Boutwell, who's here with us, and we'll be talking about industry resource challenges and related matters. So I'm sure we're going to have a real good chat on that. But before we do that, Ken, what's going on in your world?
Thanks, Anto. We've got our March issue up. The theme is Women Creating Amazing Opportunities. Melissa missed the opportunity of having her picture on the cover, so she came here today to deliver her message in person. So we get a big gain that way. We're hard at evolving automated building to serve today's needs. So that fits well with the Monday Live theme of sort of recreating and refluffing the industry. And I think out of all the things in the industry that needs fluffing, automated buildings is probably one of the ones that needs the most help, but we're hard at it. Trust us, we're working behind the scenes. I was extremely pleased to see one of our original contributing editors, Zach, who's basically the Raspberry Pi guy and was working for Contemporary Controls and was early into open controls. He got scooped up by Siemens, but he's now writing articles for Siemens. And I wanted to share that article. It's basically on BACnet SC. So great article, and good to see people growing. I think that's something we kind of miss, is how important it is to get new people with new ideas into our industry and how quickly they start to change our industry. So this whole drive to get new people in, and I'm sure Melissa's going to put more on that spin later, but it's just so important. They bring with them new ideas, new directions, and it's amazing how fast they grow. And I think Bill used the word that we're kind of in this situation that we're cannibalizing the industry because we don't have enough people, so we're stealing the people from each other. But in fact, that process is not completely wasted either. We take ideas from one camp and put them in another camp, and we actually change the industry by cannibalization, maybe. I'm not sure that's the best spin on that, but that's the way it came out. The other thing that caught my eye is this Internet of Things Access Protocol post. They came up with this flashy graphic that I'm always drawn to shiny things. And it's kind of interesting what they're doing, because it somewhat parallels what Monday Live is doing. It's kind of an IP approach, IoT approach. So maybe we can generate some discussion on that. Also, that might be something to just see what that looks like when it's put on the protocol stack. So anyway, back to you, Anto.
Thank you. Thanks, Ken. Any
Ken,
thoughts
by
on-
the way, Ken, Ken, I don't know what you do to keep your brain healthy, but you put some dots together there that was pretty good. You did it pretty quickly. At the same time that you're speaking to people. So this idea of cannibalization, and then the way it's less of a spin than a reality. Ideas going across organizations and so forth. And then I'm also reminded, because today's a people day, that, man, it is so good as a human and an employee to just go and work for a bunch of different people, to give and get new ideas. It's so good for your personal brand and all that. So I like the way you put that together, man.
Thank you.
So last week, we had the kickoff of the Division 2525 collaboration effort that is going to go on for at least the next couple of months. So last week was the first of the weekly check-in calls, and we have another one tomorrow. And I thought we'd spend a few moments here, sort of checking what actually happened there. Steve, could you give us a sort of a brief update, but just a verbal update of what happened, and maybe others can opine as well?
Sure thing. So because it was the first meeting, the attendees really set out to figure out, well, what are we really trying to accomplish here? What needs to be accomplished by this group over the next couple of months, because we set ourselves sort of a target timeline. And we had some good new participants beyond the usual Monday Live crowd. So we've got representation, from a supplier standpoint, like as we're largely represented here. We also had several representatives from the consulting engineering community. I think one piece that's missing potentially that would be helpful to get some end user contributions as well, because ultimately that's who we're trying to make this respond and responsible to, or accountable to, maybe that's a better word. But what we got to was to really 3 documents, if you will, that capture the objectives and the story, which is one, a vision document, a very simple one, maybe 2-page long, that describes what the high level objective of this effort is, so that if you're talking to a customer, you can you have a simple document that you can share with them that says what the goals and purpose of this, ultimately what all this work will result in. 2, then the second document would be a little bit longer, maybe 5 or 6 pages, that outlines the high level requirements that go into creating a specification of this sort. And then 3 would be, we've had a little discussion over the actual word, but the word specification has a lot of different meanings, and maybe a better way to think about it is maybe a library of specification language, because this is an evolving thing. It's never going to stop. It's not the spec. It's an effort that is going to be established over the next 2 months, and at that point we'll have representative language in each of the areas that are outlined in the smarter stack, but understanding that this is an evolving industry, and over time the contents of this needs to evolve along with it. So those are the 3 efforts. Those of you who are on the phone who might still be interested in participating, please let Anto or me or anybody that you have easy contact with here on Monday Live, let us know of your interest, because we're looking for more participants for sure to contribute to the language. But yeah, so I think we've got a good start in terms of defining the how to describe this thing with 3 pieces of output. But it's going to be it's going to take consistent effort week in, week out to get to where we want to go over the next 2 months. So the more help, the better.
And just to sort of expand on that we talked about too, I think one of the other conclusions we had, and why we're asking for the help, different people are good at different parts to that documents that Steve said, right? So I know we've got people on here that are really good at creating vision documents, overview stuff, and then there are people who are really good at creating detailed specifications. So even if you think you can contribute a little bit, there are definitely a lot of places that we can use to help with. So don't think about, that you have to get involved in the nitty-gritty of the details of the specifications. There are a lot of interesting sections that we need help and review on.
Yeah, good point. Thanks for that, Anno. Steve, any other comments? I know Jim and Tracy at least were on that call. Thoughts?
I think that's a pretty good summary, and reiterate that we need to widen, I think, participation, if for nothing more than a broader set of skills and viewpoints on that. So reiterate the invite to bring others, join and or bring others into the group, I think, moving forward. And also total agreement on this is going to be a living document, let's say, that will continue to evolve over time.
Yeah,
I see Ernie Beck wants to join.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I saw that. I took note of that. Thank you. Great. Thanks, Ernie.
and so I thought it was interesting. Sort of, I sat in on the meeting, and I'm an outsider and all that, and I thought what people might find interesting is there's a disparate, like all kinds of different professions on this call, and how people are viewing these things or not viewing them, and the conversation that went on around that, I thought was meaningful, and I learned a bunch, and I thought it was interesting to see, the different types of people, including the consulting engineers and the contractors and the MSIs and all that. So I thought it was an interesting roundtable, and I kind of like watch it sort of disintegrate and then come back together. It was good.
Break it and then make the omelet, something like that.
Something like that.
All right. Thank you. Thanks all. I was just compelled to put this on a slide, and I don't really have that much to say, other than I think we're all heartbroken with what's going on over there. There's obviously lots of impacts with what's going on over there to our industry and to the world, but I'm not sure that's something that we necessarily need to sort of labor over right now. But I thought I'd just let people sort of make some comments if they want to, and just make sure we recognize this.
Something that's been reported here is that there's growing unrest in Russia, and all the sanctions and everything else are really beginning to take effect. And one of the articles was suggesting that people are really going to start getting angry, and there could be problems at home for Putin because of the limitation of availability of everything, and what's going to happen to the economy. So, and they also said that the soldiers actually weren't that good at combat. They're okay at actually going in, marching in with civilians and stuff like that, but they're actually not that great as soldiers, the Russians. So, be interesting to see what happens, because I think there has been a proposal. I mean, it's not acceptable, but sort of 4 things that they may be prepared to discuss around a peace talk. So whether the combination of that unrest and being able to at least get around a table might be interesting to watch that space.
Roger, it's interesting. I was heartened by this group of longshoremen over in the UK who simply wouldn't offload the oil from this Russian ship. I kind of like that story, man. I don't know.
The thing that was most, in fact, impactful to me over the weekend was I watched an interview of a Russian soldier that was captured, and it was an interview of him basically apologizing and telling the story of the lies that he was told as he was entering Ukraine. If you can find it, I actually shared it on LinkedIn, so you should be able to find that. But it's really quite compelling.
I think it's also interesting the closer you're at. I mean, the Polish guys who I work with at ISMA, Controlly there, the whole, the Polish people are all sort of getting funds together, the companies, the individuals, they're taking in huge amount of people coming across the border. They're just embracing the whole thing. It's really quite heartwarming to actually see, that they are, they're really kind of trying to help as much as they can locally to to help, minimize the effect on these people. But I think, when you sit down and have your dinner and think, well, they were doing that themselves a couple of weeks ago, and now they're probably running for the border with whatever they can grab to try and take the kids and families to safety. So
one of the most telling images that I've seen, and there's obviously been lots of images we've all seen, is at the train station in Poland when they're coming across the border and folks are getting off the train. Obviously, we see loads and loads of children, and the Polish people have left strollers there, and I'm talking about hundreds of strollers there to obviously help those who are getting off the train and whatever the case is. And that is, you don't need any captions. It's one of those images that just says everything without having to say a word. So
one thing sorry, Melissa.
No, you go on.
Oh, just a quick one. I think there's going to be a major upside for Poland, oddly enough. One of our colleagues has a British friend, who had a software business in Ukraine. They had some 30 plus software engineers, working out of Ukraine, as a lot of companies do. And he, last week, he was actually trying to get hold of, my colleague was trying to get hold of his buddy, and he said, look, I can't talk. I'm leading a convoy of 6+ vans of 30 families out of Ukraine to Poland, and taking the guys were staying to fight, but they'd be joining their families soon after. So there's a major evacuation of intelligent, smart people out of Ukraine into neighboring countries like Poland, which are going to benefit greatly from it. As a result.
Melissa, did you want to?
Yeah, I've been it's been a warm thought to see the innovative kindness, not just the strollers, Mark. I think that's a great example, but all the Airbnbs that have been bought that haven't been used. And I loved whether how isolated it was or not, the soldier that was captured and they were feeding him and taking care of him. It's a great opportunity for someone to rise above the ridiculous. So
Well, it's a great opportunity for us all to rise above the ridiculous. So maybe that's how we should wrap this up.
Yeah, I think Skip's got a good comment in the chat there too about, I think if we come out of this, we're going to be focusing on positive ways how to do better, right? And I agree.
I'll just throw my 2 cents in. I think we've all grown up knowing that war is horrible, but we've never been able to see it in real time with all the imagery and with all the communications the way we are now. And it's, for whatever reasons, the war, for example, in Syria, was never broadcast the way this is. I don't think it was fundamentally any different, which says something about something, right? But because people are people, but we're all seeing just how horrifying war is. And my hope is that it's a wake-up call to the world at large that we've got to do better. But the last century should have been enough of a instruction to us as humanity to stop it. And here we are continuing to do more of it. And there's really no excuse. We can do better, and we're seeing just how awful it is. And I'm happy to see just how the world is reacting and being outraged by the reality of it all.
Well, thank you for the comment. Let's move on now. It's important for us to do that. So reconfiguring the BAS industry, and today's moderator is Melissa. So Melissa, welcome. I'm going to stop my share and hand over the baton to you. And
well, I'd also like to invite Skip Freeman to join in on the conversation. He and I had some fun conversations earlier today, and I think he has some interesting thoughts to contribute to some of what will come up today. But I want to take a little bit different approach to thinking about how we're reconfiguring the BAS industry, just putting the word BAS in it just makes it really focused on the technology of what we do. And a lot of the conversations that I have in my business have a lot to do with the strategy as it relates to succession planning and how we prepare transitioning leadership and really make decisions on priorities of what those core focus areas are. And I think it's particularly relevant when we look at the context of shaking things up. You know, one of my favorite things about Ken, besides that he'll just whack it right at me and tell me I didn't turn in an article this week, is how good he is to talk about how much he learns from everybody and how important it is to humble ourselves and learn from a younger generation. So I think succession planning and acknowledging the fact that there is a huge amount of people in our industry that are in that average age of 58 years old, and what does that topic look like in the halls of leadership? So in that, so if we think about that and we pose some questions in that way, I don't know why am I, hang on. What are the greatest threats to a company owner's typical exit strategy? Now, I know this industry has a lot of huge companies, but small business makes up the fabric of this industry right now. And small business, if it's defined, you know, in the way that the Small Business Administration does, is still a pretty sizable organization. But what are the greatest threats and challenges to how we plan executive transition? I want to hear your thoughts before I throw any topics on the screen. Is this a relevant subject to any of us in this room today? I think we all have a fair amount of gray hair. There's none of us that are in our 30s, you know, right here today, including me. I'm in this category too. So what are the things that keep us up at night?
So Melissa, it's Mark. So you just did the most polite way I have ever heard somebody say, "You're old, dude. You're old."
We are old, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel so good after the way you presented that. Thank you so much.
Well, we're all in this boat together. I had a birthday this month, and you know, we're not getting any younger, and it's a very important topic in all of the conversations that I have throughout the month. So, thoughts? What is the biggest challenge? What's the obstacle in the way to having high confidence in our executive leadership transitions?
I'll start. I think I look at it is, and I'll sum it up in one word: realization. It's the person not realizing that, one, they are not going to be around forever. Number two, not realizing that most likely they have some folks within their organization who could fill the bill, but are not doing anything to engage them, train them, I don't know, whatever word you want to use. So I kind of look at it like that. That is the biggest threat, I believe, is not being real, you know, coming to the realization and don't think this is real, that you are Superman, Superwoman, or whoever.
I think, Mark, kind of building on that, you know, from taking a company from 1 million to 2 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, and so on. All those need huge changes within an organization. And obviously, when you're in the smaller numbers, it tends to be run by an individual. And the challenge comes when it's delegating to other people, not knowing, you know, not sort of when the decisions are being made, is fighting bottom lip to actually say, hey, you know, whilst I think I know better, I'm going to let these guys go on. And I think the other challenge is that as they bring on people, is kind of recognizing that at some point you need an HR department to actually help this whole thing go along. because it used to be run by the guy and his wife, and then it got up and she also was the finance lady, and it's trying to make all those changes as you go from a small to a medium to a recognizable thing, and it boils down to being able to hand over that responsibility without micromanaging everything. And so it's growing up every step, which is a real challenge for most companies and individuals.
Tracy, what do you think?
Did you say Tracy?
I did.
I love that you introduced this topic. It's something that is near and dear to the heart for me, always thinking about what does an exit strategy look like in succession planning. And, you know, I think historically the challenge that we would all point to is not enough younger talent coming in or interested. It's not that there aren't talented younger people, interest in our industry, right? And how do we make it a little bit sexier, so to speak, for people to come into our industry and do what we do? And, you know, I think we're on the verge of that all changing, to be honest, with more and more IoT-like products and programs and projects and platforms, all the P's coming into our industry, that people, the other P, will follow that. But I'm still a little concerned, to be honest, trying to get the right kind of people coming into the industry. And, you know, succession can start with a very personal one-on-one kind of a thing, but overall, if you look at succession more in terms of our industry, how do we hand our industry off to the next generation? That's something we've talked a lot about on this forum. We've got a ways to go, for sure.
Yeah, and when we think about exit strategies, it's a lot more than a person or a few people. It's also where the priorities of an organization are, and, you know, what direction are we moving? Are we, you know, sending the company in the division of having the very best 8-track tape player right as the compact disc comes out, you know?
Yeah.
those kinds of thoughts for those of us that remember 8-track tapes. But so if you think about,
let me jump in and say, if you go back to one, so this exit strategy thing, it's not just people selling a company, although that's what people think about. It could just be you leaving a role, or, you know, moving up to another role, or succession planning, like you said. So to me, the biggest holdback is always going to be expectations. Just holding on to expectations of how we think things should be. We've always done it that way. I expect the person's going to look like this, sound like this, talk like this. I want them to do it the same way I did it back in '88. Expectations and our inability to just open up and experience something new. That's my opinion on that.
yeah, and that may threaten innovation.
Pete Swanson just posted a comment. I think it's very, should bring it up. He is really talking about the best approach is to find somebody that shares your passion, that you can train to do the job. So the passion drives it.
Yeah. So
great, as long as the passion's not keeping everything off the internet, or the passion's keeping doing everything like we did in 2003. As long as the passion's aligned, but I do understand the point there.
Yeah, vision and alignment are certainly important before you build momentum, for sure. Or you could be running in the wrong direction. So if we think about other threats, all right, many of the things that we've talked about today really are they're common in all of us. If we're willing to face our own hypocrisy in the mirror, and, you know, look, I have many of those challenges myself, but when we also think about confidence and the topic of confidence and having confidence in the future and confidence in decisions and knowing some of the challenges, I had an interesting conversation the other day about, you know, will we be able to innovate our way out of the labor shortage? Will we be able to innovate our way out of supply shortages? And then you have all kinds of new innovation threats that pop up overnight. what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that we need to equip the next generation to be able to problem solve their way through and innovate their way through? If you were going to pick one thing and you've got your team and you've got your strategy, what is it that you would be most focused on resolving?
You know, something that has come up again a few times in this forum here is how we deploy systems, what their architectures look like. And I think that there is change happening, kind of maybe under the covers a little bit, but it reminds me of a few things. You know, I remember when my wife way back when came to me and said, I need a cell phone. And I thought that was the dumbest idea I had heard in a very long time. And now I can't leave a room without carrying mine with me, right? And I remember the first time somebody put up for sale a security system that a homeowner could deploy on their own. Again, I thought that's really silly. It's too complicated. It will never happen. And now look, everybody does it again, right? And in our industry, I see all these standalone IoT applications, these little islands of automation that are going out there, and they're not integrated. And the whole task, we talked about Division 2525, the whole task of integrating all this stuff together and how difficult it is. But I don't know, there's a part of me that is thinking that somebody's going to figure out a much easier way than the way we're even thinking about it to make all of this happen. Or somebody's going to decide, you know what, we don't care if everything's integrated. It's got, as long as we can get access to it and the data, somebody will build an application that combines these two applications into one or not. And I know that, and I'm the first to argue the counterpoint to that, by the way. But there's a change happening here that I think in the not too distant future, we're going to look back and thought, I never thought that would happen. And by the way, that's kind of handing over the industry to the next generation in a sense. That's the succession of our industry, so to speak.
So what do you think is the force that's really pushing some of that? Go ahead.
Anna, do you want to jump in or you want me to answer that first?
Well, I was just going to amplify Tracy's point there. And that's one of the big things I think is a risk of any of the moving from one generation to the others. Sometimes we get too enamored with this is how it's all done and this is how we do it successfully. And you have to follow this process and we've got to train you to follow this process when at the same time we're going, but we also want you to innovate and come up with the new ideas. And so they're juxtaposed, right? How do you do that? This is how we've always done it, and this is how we've made money. But by the way, you have to do it better. That's a tough call on bringing someone in.
I wouldn't mind jumping in here a bit and bringing back the cannibalism as a healthy thing for our industry, because what it does is it forces chaos, and chaos causes change, and we need to change. And I grew up in Alberta province next to us here in BC, and the oil field back in those days was booming and people could get jobs. And so it opened up a whole bunch of other jobs. And as my learning, I got all kinds of opportunities I would have never had in a normal circumstance, but because there was nobody to do these jobs, I became an automation consultant because nobody else was there to do that. That opportunity would have never opened in an ordinary organized plan. So anyway, the fact that cannibalism is almost somebody is saying that person's too good for you, or you're not paying them enough or not giving them enough respect. They pull them out of your organization. It makes you think of how you're going to refill that. And I think that growth is good, and it forces us to even do things differently.
Well, I think, Ken, one of the things that you said is true in science too. We all learned that, like, for example, fasting induces apoptosis, which is technically self-eating when you've got excess, you know, and then there are all these natural systems in place for that. But what is it that you think would really need to be cannibalized? What do we need to eat up that we've got excess of? What is it that we should think differently on? And if you were going to put, I mean, it doesn't have to be anything on this page, but I mean, where would you say it would be a good thing if we got rid of a little bit of this?
The thought that came to mind previously when I was talking was Ken's comments from months gone by about all us gray-haired thinkers and how we think and not leaving room for new innovative thinking. And the more time that goes by, the more it's not that I didn't believe him. It's just seeing it in a different way, that how really true that is, because with or without us, people are innovating and introducing products and platforms into our market, right? And Melissa, you had asked about, you know, where or how or whatever. And I think a lot of this is coming from consumer world. And, you know, there's scale in consumer world. And scale means lower costs, and lower costs is usually good for any industry, as long as there's, you know, a equitable amount of value added to it for people to make money. So, you know, if we can find ways to piggyback on consumer world and technologies and products into our space, you know, that brings with it new thinking and new ways of doing things, more standalone IoT kind of centric architectures. I think that is where a lot of this is coming from, and where the change is going to happen in our industry. I grew up in a small town in northern Maine, had one industry. It was a paper mill. And for the last 10 years, that paper mill has been slowly but surely cannibalized, one scrap of metal at a time, one truck full at a time, because we used to make newsprint there. And newspapers just aren't doing the volume they used to, and magazines aren't doing the volume they used to, right? And that wasn't because some competitor came in and made paper better, cheaper, faster, right? It was a completely different technology or way of thinking about communicating.
And we were listening to our 8-track tapes on the way to the paper mill.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I chime in? Can I chime in? Yeah. One of the things that's been sort of fascinating me in the last few months, and I brought it up once or twice on Monday Live, is that the notion that the world is going to be more automated. There's going to be robots and the whole Jetson things. I know it's not to be taken literally, but there is going to be a lot of automation that's going to happen in the world, and automation is about the shift of workforce. I mean, the shift of who or what does things. And what I find interesting is that we're in the automation industry. So there's something going on there. I'm not quite sure what to make of that, but we're in the very industry that is likely to facilitate the type of automation that will reduce the need for human skill. I just wanted to say that. I'm not quite sure what.
Yeah, and that's a good thing, and that's been happening since, you know, it's been happening for 5,000 years, right? There was never a time when people wouldn't drop their pitchforks and run to the city and work in a factory. There was never a time when people would drop their factory jobs and go do. It's appropriate for people like us to be getting rid of the absolute grind labor stuff so people can do other things, maybe write poetry. I don't know, but this is appropriate. This is how it's supposed to go.
But I think
so.
you're
Let me.
right.
Can I
Right,
like to weigh in to Melissa's fundamental question here? What's the block or the obstacle to be overcome? Right. I think it's fundamentally the tension between control and information. So the younger generation has grown up in a world where it's all information driven. They can act on just the data and it's proliferated, of course, through the smartphones and the apps and all the programming languages. It's all information centric. Okay, it all revolves in that sphere. We start with control, and you can't run a building without first knowing how to control the actual equipment that we touch. And yes, that control then ultimately generates information, and then you can start to act on it in all the ways that the information world is doing. But unless, to your point, Anto, the control side gets fully robotized, in other words, basically you put a device in there, figures out exactly how to control that chiller without anybody ever touching it, without any programming it. We're certainly not there today. So how do you take the younger generation, which may have grown up without any exposure to what it takes to control something, and make them appreciate the importance of it, the necessity of it? That's, to me, the biggest challenge I see in our industry. Is that's where it begins, and that has to work before you can even talk about what you're going to do with the information.
But I think, Steve, also we've been our own worst enemy because we haven't adopted kind of a standard way of doing things. You know, the way I write a control loop is better than yours, and you think yours is better than Anto's, and it's the same thing, right? You know, and if there was at least some sort of standard with that could actually say, okay, that's the way you do it, and then we just bank that, leaves us more time to get on with the innovative stuff. And I think tying it together with a couple of things that have been said there, I think we are going to see a lot of automation in factory, and then we're going to see a lot of manufacturing. And you know, what we've learned from what's been going on over the past couple of years is that, you know, it no longer makes sense to get China to make everything, because the distribution charges and the costs of the delivery are huge. And if you know, the reason it went out there was because labor was cheap. Now, if we automate a factory, then that factory wasn't there before. It's probably, you know, going to be cheaper and better and more reliable by having it manufactured locally. So it's probably going to bring that back. But I think there's also a misconception about the younger generation. I think they're not, I wouldn't say they're not technically smart, but what they are great users of the technology, which with all the things like automation that will allow them to actually, you know, be more innovative and utilize the data and the technology to actually provide us with better solutions and accelerate, if it can get any faster. But we're usually the worst industry to adopt stuff. But hopefully that will change as people get more engaged with access to the information and being able to use that in the best practical ways to, you know, for people's lives and the environment they're working in.
That's a really good point. And I'm curious what this group thinks. You know, most of you are aware that I came from an industrial background and fell into this BAS world. But when you start thinking about safety instrumented systems and, you know, some of the risks with creativity and not being aware of how to control, as you say, Steve, but what happens if you don't do it correctly, where some of the risks can be tremendous. What is an appropriate way, maybe Mr. Sinclair, why don't you give us some really good wisdom about how you always have good connection with the younger generation to convey the risks of not having good control over some of these things, but yet still incentivize innovation and creativity and maybe a little bit of appetite to come try.
Okay, thank you. It actually, that feeds in well with what's just kicking around in my mind is in some discussions we were having last week, we were talking about bringing new younger people in and how that might work. And I was worried about how we would teach them the technology. And the comment was made is they bring it with them. And this whole connected world, they don't know what an 8-track is, but they certainly know how to stream and set up any kind of Bluetooth. That's all in their DNA. And when you hire these younger people, they come with all of these resources. And ironically enough, it's the resources we need. The big thing for us is a industry of control freaks. which in fact we all are. We
We all are.
basically, we never let go of anything. And even in our little boxes here, it's good that we all have little boxes, because we'd be jabbing each other if we could actually reach out of the box. So yeah, that's kind of interesting too. I mean, it's an industry of control freaks. We need to grow younger. The young folks come with just completely different ideas of how to do it, and we need to listen to those. There's some value of us, bringing with us our core businesses, but we really got to just get out of our heads and grow.
Oh, boy, you got that right, Ken. Here we are sitting here, how proud we are that we know what an 8-track is. Who cares? Roger said it, man. It's in the DNA. These people come wanting and understanding data and technology and all of that. The question is, can we actually attract them? Like someone.
All right, I'm going to push back on you a little bit, Bill, Mr. Marketing. One of the reasons why it is kind of valuable to know about that, we have a lot of evidence that young people respond to opportunity. And when you can demonstrate that the people in this call have a whole lot to do with creating opportunity, and it's the stuff that we've done that mean that you're not listening to an 8-track tape, and that we've got some really cool stories, and that they can have a story like that too. We found that, a huge number of people really resonate with that message. And if we're not looking at it from a control freak standpoint, which I have to look my own hypocrisy in the face, but there may be a marketing message there. Like, who can envision what it would be 2040?
Yeah. For me, this whole conversation is about marketing in a sense. I'm following a team of salespeople now, and if they have to sit and listen to me that I used to drink water out of a hose or work on an 8-track, I'll lose them. So anyway, it's marketing. Somebody, I think it was Ernie, asked the question, how many people in high school understand that this industry even exists? Which, as a neophyte in this industry, I think it's a cool industry.
So on that note, I want Skip, he's been really quiet, and he does some really interesting things that put him in a special place to have knowledge of what applicants today respond to. When we think, the world revolves around us and we have these interviews and we're not paying attention to the way we come across to others, Skip Freeman's right there on the front lines and has those answers. Sheriff Skip, tell us a little bit about what you've learned from the whole employer pitch point of view.
Thanks, Melissa. So we've had some really excellent discussions, and a couple of things, just some stories I'll share that I believe amplifies some of these issues. But kind of going back first to Ken's point, I guess I'm the chief cannibal. So it's my job to move the people around in the industry. And right now, when people come to me, it's because they need a plug and play candidate. They need someone who can do the job today. And one of the things we have to do is figure out a way, and part of what Melissa is doing is get the young people not only in, but at least upskilled to that point where they can provide value to a customer. So a few points I'd like to make along these lines. We seldom work with the large corporations. Sometimes we do, but most of my clients are the small to mid-sized firm. Over the last 3 years, we've identified a little over 2,000 mechanical contractors and systems integrators around the nation that are 50 people or less. And the majority are 20 or less. So that's the first point. A second point I'd like to make is the talent pool for any given job is smaller than we think. And so once we activate, if a candidate isn't quote unquote looking for a job, and I'm in the marketplace talking to them and I get them interested in a job, they always want to know what else is out there. And they'll begin to take a look at other roles on their own. And there's so much need out there that next thing you know, a candidate is going to have 2 or 3 choices before the process is over if we don't move fast enough with any particular client. So what that really means is, and I discussed it in the article in this month's automatedbuildings.com issue, that because candidates have 2 or 3 choices, let's say on any given time, there's 10,000 candidates available. But if they all have 2 choices, that really means the talent pool just got cut in half. There's 5,000 choices or candidates available, really. So that's a point. Second point, coming back to the small companies. I right now am working on 10 openings. I was counting, as we discussed here, of the 10 openings, I specifically have 4 where the client has asked for somebody 3 to 5 years of experience, and 1 5 to 10 years of experience. They don't exist. And the candidate that is 3 to 5 years, as I was sharing with one hiring manager, we were speaking Saturday, as a matter of fact, he wants to hire 2 people of 3 to 5 years of experience. Why? He's a small firm, 12 people. They're selling business. They got to grow. He needs field people. Then he also told me, he said, Skip, I'm 61. I want to retire here in a few years, and I want to have somebody I can train up to maybe ultimately take over the company. So we have 2 dynamics going on at the same time in this 12-person firm. He needs immediate help, and he wants to train somebody up. He's 61. He wants to retire by 67, 68. Well, I told him if we bring in somebody who's 3 to 5 years, they job hop. We think they job hop. To them, staying at a job 2 to 3 years is normal. We think it's job hopping. I said they won't be around. Also, because of this dynamic, the candidates who are 3 to 5 years now are beginning to realize how much in demand they are, and they are actually beginning to cost more than a candidate who's 30 years in the profession. And so the cost it's interesting. Again, supply and demand. I have a 30-year person, BAS control tech, who would be interested in $41 to $45 an hour. Same person 3 to 5 years is wanting $51 an hour, and they're less skilled, but they know they can get it. So those are just some initial things that come to mind. The other thing is as I was sharing with Melissa, this gets back to the idea that the talent pool is smaller than we think it is because the candidates have more than our job to consider. Is we have to get them compelled to want to start our job. And so I've been working to try to create processes to help that candidate be more excited about the job we're working on than that job down the street. So that's going to be another thing. But so right now we have 2 things in our industry we have to do. Number one is long-term, clearly bring in more people. But short-term, if a company needs to hire somebody today, we better have a more compelling opportunity than that next person down the street. And we've got to use our marketing skills, our sales skills, and ways to bring that candidate's focus to our job, not that job down the street. So Melissa, is there anything else in there you'd like for me to hit upon that maybe we've discussed that you'd like for me to bring out?
No, I think you made a great segue to the end of the session in that, to some extent, we got to do what Bill said and we got to be cool. We gotta think a little bit more about what their interests are and not always about our point of view. And it is an important topic because I would strongly suggest that in our industry, it is my personal opinion that we are so focused on the technician shortage that we are not watching the great missed opportunity if we are not developing new executive leadership in our industry. I believe that it is one of the most important things that we should be doing, because if we significantly impact a handful of people to be change makers in our sphere of influence, then that might be the secret sauce that we need to get the 30,000 new people in our industry. It may not be us wooing them in, it may be these new leaders. So I just want to encourage us to not get so focused on the deep pain that we have in the war for people right now, that we need technicians, which, I mean, it is huge and I'm highly involved in trying to help. But executive leadership is as equal of a need, although fewer in numbers.
I'm just going to keep hiring senior citizens. They're cheaper,
Hey,
apparently.
you and a lot of people. It's we have had some really great success with people wanting a career transition. And new people doesn't have to be in the 18 to 25-year-old range.
Yeah, and by the way, they're super grateful. They're grateful. The senior citizens, quote unquote, are grateful.
Well, yes, and I'm about to be one of them, so I need to be hitting the pavement and exercising and making sure my brain's as good as Ken's, because I can't keep up with them. I can't even get an article turned in on time.
Ken's got a secret sauce. I'm sure it's MCT oil or something like that. I'm going to figure it out soon.
I think it's because he lives in Canada.
95.
No, he listens to 8-track cassettes.
That's the secret
sauce.
Yeah, no streaming.
Well, thank you for having me today, Anto. Thank you for the invitation, all my friends. And I think we're going to wrap up with a minute to spare. And was today a good use of time?
Yeah, I think that's a great sort of closing question, maybe to the group. Was this an a valuable conversation, team?
Oh, I think so. I think we only scratched the surface in the process.
Yeah.
I think there's room to come back to it.
Yeah, I love what Pete Scanlon just put up there. Why can't this industry, I do think it was valuable. So the question is, why can't we start to steal from other industries? And how do we have to view ourselves in this industry to actually attract and retain these people from other industries? That's a very pertinent question.
I love that question, and I hope to have some really cool thoughts on that in the next 6 to 9 months.
Yeah, I think it's partly to do with, we almost subconsciously think of ourselves as being an extension of the janitorial closet. And I know Jim and others have talked about that. And if you say something enough times, you start to believe it.
That's right. Jim is not big jig dish.
I think
So
it's
we need
when somebody steals one of our key people and utilizes them better than we do, I think that's a real message. It tells me that you missed a big opportunity there. You had somebody who was ready to grow better, to basically bring new people under him and do all kinds under him or her, and do all kinds of neat things. And you missed that opportunity. Somebody saw there was an opportunity to better utilize that person. So it's this whole growth thing. Actually moving people around in the industry, I think, is healthy. Not too rapidly, but in like a 3-year cycle is very productive.
Okay,
Yeah.
So we need to bring this to a wrap. So thank you very much, Melissa and Skip. Great conversation. We'll be back next week. Meantime, video of this will be up tomorrow morning on YouTube. And with all that, thank you all, and have a great week. Bye-bye all. Bye.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Skip.
Bye, guys.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
See
Great.
ya.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks,
Skip.
Melissa.